It had been years since I left Emma. My life had taken on a rhythm of routine, a monotonous hum that kept me numb to the past. But nothing could have prepared me for the jolt of seeing her standing at my doorstep one rainy afternoon. The rain was pouring down in sheets, drumming against the pavement and soaking through her coat. Her eyes were red, but her gaze was steady as she looked up at me. "Dominic," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Emma." I was taken aback, my heart racing. I had always imagined this day would come in some abstract, far-off future, but here she was, real and wet, and in desperate need of shelter. "I know it's been a long time," she began, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I didn't know where else to go. I closed the door behind her, feeling the weight of the years we had spent apart settle heavily in the room. "Why now? Why are you here?" Emma took off her coat, revealing the weariness etched into her face. "I need to talk about everything that happened. I can't move forward until we clear the air." I led her to the living room and gestured for her to sit. "I didn't think you'd ever want to revisit this. We've both moved on." She sat down slowly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I haven't moved on, Dominic. Not really. I know I made mistakes, but there are things you don't know, things that changed everything for me." I sat across from her, crossing my arms defensively. "What could you possibly say that would make a difference now?" Emma took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with tears. "That party, what happened there, it wasn't just about me breaking our promises. It's more complicated than that. I need you to understand what really happened." "Complicated?" I echoed, my voice rising with frustration. "Complicated doesn't change the fact that you disregarded our marriage and went against my wishes. What could you say that would make that okay?" Her eyes locked onto mine, a mix of pleading and determination in her gaze. "Dominic, I was drugged that night. I didn't know what was happening to me until it was too late. I never wanted to betray you. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to explain." I stared at her, struggling to process her words. "Drugged? You mean you didn't?" "No," she cut me off, shaking her head vigorously. "I didn't know what was happening. I was out of my mind. By the time I realized, it was too late. I've been trying to make sense of it ever since." The room fell into a heavy silence. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but it was difficult to reconcile with the pain and betrayal I had felt. "I don't know what to say," I finally admitted. Emma reached out, her hand trembling. "I know. I'm not expecting things to be fixed overnight, but I need you to hear me out. For closure, if nothing else." I looked at her hand, then back into her eyes. The years of hurt and confusion had built walls between us, but in that moment I could see the cracks beginning to form. "All right," I said slowly. "Let's talk. But don't expect it to be easy." Emma nodded, her relief palpable. "Thank you." As we began to delve into the past, the rain outside seemed to soften, a quiet backdrop to the painful conversation that was just beginning. The road to understanding and resolution seemed long and uncertain, but at least we were taking the first step together. The dispute between Emma and me began over something that might seem trivial to outsiders, but was significant for us. It was the night of a party, a glamorous affair that Emma insisted on attending, despite my reservations. I remember coming home from work that day, tired and preoccupied with the usual stress of my job. The house was quiet, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the office. I saw Emma standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the strap of her dress. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling slightly. I glanced at her, momentarily caught off guard by how stunning she looked. The dress was more revealing than usual, hugging her curves in a way that made me uneasy. "You look beautiful, but are you sure you want to go?" She raised an eyebrow, a hint of annoyance creeping into her voice. "What do you mean? It's just a party." "It's not just any party," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "It's a work event for that colleague of yours, Derek. I've heard things about him." Emma's face hardened. Derek's harmless. I've told you, it's not a big deal. It is to me. I insisted. I don't want you going there. I feel like you're ignoring my concerns. Emma crossed her arms, her frustration palpable. It's not about you. It's my choice to go. I need to maintain my friendships and be social. I sighed, feeling the weight of our disagreement. I'm not trying to control you. I just think it's inappropriate, especially considering how you'll be dressed. She threw her hands up in exasperation. You're being unreasonable. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. I felt my frustration rising. I'm not saying you can't make your own decisions. I'm just asking you to consider how it affects us, our marriage. Emma's expression softened, but her resolve remained. I've already made plans, Dominic. I need to go. It's important to me. The argument simmered throughout the evening. I watched as she left, feeling a gnawing sense of unease. It wasn't just about the party. It was about a broader issue of trust and respect. As the party drew nearer, my anxiety grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My phone rang that night, and it was Eva, Emma's best friend. Her voice was light and taunting. Hey Dominic, Eva said, a hint of mockery in her tone. I just wanted to let you know that Emma's having a great time. She looks incredible. My heart sank. Eva, what are you doing? Just thought you'd like to know, she said, hanging up before I could respond. I paced the room, the call only adding to my growing frustration. Emma was out there, and I felt a chasm opening between us. It was clear that the evening was more than just an event for her. It was a statement. The argument I had with Emma earlier wasn't just about a party. It was about deeper issues that had been brewing for months. We had different expectations and a lack of understanding that now seemed insurmountable. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma's choice to attend the party was emblematic of the larger problems in our relationship. What seemed like a small disagreement was, in reality, a reflection of our differing values and priorities. The following morning, I was left alone with my thoughts, the reality of our conflict sinking in. Emma's decision to attend the party, despite my concerns, had opened up a wider rift between us, a rift that would soon become even more significant as we continued to unravel the complexities of our troubled marriage. Eva had always been a point of contention between Emma and me. From the very beginning, I'd harbored doubts about her influence on Emma. Eva's lifestyle and the choices she made seemed to me like a bad influence, though Emma never saw it that way. One afternoon, Emma and I were having coffee at our kitchen table. She was flipping through a fashion magazine, and I was sifting through some paperwork. Eva's name came up in conversation, and I decided it was time to voice my concerns. Emma, can we talk about Eva for a minute? I said, trying to keep my tone casual. Emma looked up, her expression immediately guarded. What about her? I just don't understand why you're so close to her, I said, choosing my words carefully. Her lifestyle is not exactly what I call healthy. The parties, the constant socializing. It's not what we need right now. Emma set her magazine down and frowned. Eva's been my friend for years. She's always been there for me. And she's not as bad as you make her out to be. It's not just about her being bad, I countered. It's about the impact she has on you. You're always out late, always wrapped up in drama. I'm worried it's affecting our relationship. Emma's face flushed with frustration. Eva's not the problem, Dominic. She's just a friend. If you have issues, maybe you should talk to me instead of blaming her. I could feel my frustration bubbling over. It's not just about talking. It's about the choices you make. Going to parties, dressing provocatively. These aren't things that build trust. I feel like you're letting her drag you into a world that's tearing us apart. Emma stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not letting anyone drag me anywhere. I'm my own person. Eva's my friend, and I'm not going to abandon her just because you have issues with her. As she walked away, I felt a pang of helplessness. I understood that Emma valued her friendship with Ava deeply, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Ava's influence was creating a wedge between us. Later that week, I ran into Ava at a cafe. She was sitting at a corner table, her phone in hand, chatting animatedly with a friend. I approached her, feeling the weight of my concerns. "Ava," I said, trying to sound cordial, "do you have a minute?" She looked up, surprised. "Domenic, what's up?" "I wanted to talk to you about something," I said, taking the seat across from her. "I'm worried about how your influence is affecting Emma." Ava raised an eyebrow. "My influence? Domenic, I'm just a friend. I'm not forcing her to do anything." "It's not about force," I said, trying to articulate my thoughts. "It's about the environment you're a part of. The parties, the late nights, they're affecting her. And by extension, they're affecting us." Ava sighed, looking slightly irritated. "Emma and I have been friends for years. If you have a problem, you should talk to her directly. Don't blame me for your issues." "I'm not blaming you entirely," I said, feeling the frustration build. "I'm just asking you to understand that your lifestyle has consequences. It's not just a personal choice. It's something that affects those around you." Ava's expression softened slightly, but she remained defensive. "I get that you're worried, Domenic, but Emma is an adult. She makes her own choices." The conversation ended on a tense note. I left the cafe feeling no closer to resolving the underlying issues. The more I tried to address Ava's influence, the more I felt like I was missing the bigger picture. It wasn't just about Ava. It was about the dynamic between us and how we were handling our differences. Emma's relationship with Ava had become a symbol of a broader issue in our marriage. It was less about the individual and more about how we were navigating the complexities of our lives together. The rift between us seemed to widen with every passing day, leaving me to wonder if we could ever bridge the gap. The tension between Emma and me had been building for weeks, but it reached a breaking point when she announced she was going to attend a high-profile charity party that Ava had been raving about. The event was notorious for its late-night revelry and its questionable guest list, which only fueled my concerns. One evening, as I was scrolling through some documents in my study, Emma walked in, dressed in a stunning yet revealing gown. Her hair was styled meticulously, and she carried an air of excitement that only deepened my unease. "Are you really going to wear that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. Emma looked at me, startled. "Yes, Domenic. Why?" "I thought we agreed that these kinds of events weren't good for us right now," I said, setting my papers aside. "The way you dress, the kind of people you'll be around, it's not what we need." Emma's face hardened. "I'm going to a charity event, not a nightclub. And I'm not going to let your issues dictate my choices. Ava and I have been planning this for months. This isn't just about the event," I said, feeling the frustration rise. "It's about your disregard for what I'm telling you. I'm asking you to make a choice, our marriage or these parties." Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. "So now you're giving me an ultimatum." "I'm not giving you an ultimatum," I said, trying to sound calm despite the anger simmering beneath. "I'm telling you that if you go to this party, it will show me where your priorities lie." Emma's jaw tightened. "You know what? I'm tired of this. I'm going to the party. If that's a problem, then maybe we need to rethink things." She turned on her heel and walked out of the room, leaving me feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. I knew this wasn't just about the party. It was about the broader issues in our relationship, but her refusal to even consider my concerns made me feel as though our marriage was on the edge of falling apart. The night of the party, I found myself pacing the living room, watching the clock tick away the hours. My mind was filled with anxiety, not just about the event itself, but about what it symbolized for our relationship. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the rift between us had grown. Around midnight, I received a call from Ava. Her voice was laced with a mix of mischief and annoyance. "Hey, Domenic. Just wanted to let you know Emma's having a great time. She looks amazing, by the way." I could hear the laughter and music in the background, each sound a stark reminder of the things I feared. Ava, I need to talk to Emma. Ava's tone grew more guarded. I don't think that's going to be possible right now. She's not in a position to talk. Maybe you should just let things be. Frustration bubbled over. This isn't about just letting things be. It's about respecting our relationship and the boundaries we've set. Ava's voice grew sharp. Dominic, you made your point. Emma's an adult. If she wants to enjoy herself, she will. It's not your place to control her actions. The call ended, and I was left with a sinking feeling. I felt isolated, unable to bridge the gap between what I wanted for our marriage and what Emma seemed determined to pursue. The next morning, Emma returned home, her makeup smudged and her dress slightly wrinkled. She looked tired but satisfied. Had a good time? I asked, my voice betraying none of the anxiety I had felt the previous night. Emma shrugged, her face closed off. It was a good party. I needed to unwind. And what about us? I pressed, my frustration evident. Emma's eyes met mine, and I saw a mix of defiance and exhaustion. I made my choice, Dominic. You need to decide if you can accept that or not. Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog. It was clear that this event was more than just a night out. It was a stark representation of the widening chasm between us. The decision she had made in defiance of my concerns was a sign of how far we had drifted from each other. The charity party was everything Emma had anticipated and more. Glittering lights, high society mingling, and a sense of opulence that seemed to drown out any semblance of caution. Emma had arrived with Ava and was quickly swept into the whirlpool of guests and festivities. What was meant to be an evening of glamour and goodwill was about to take a dark turn. Emma glanced around the lavishly decorated ballroom. The room filled with chatter and clinking glasses. The atmosphere was electric, and for a moment, her apprehensions seemed to fade into the background. She spotted Ava near the bar, and they exchanged excited waves. Emma felt a pang of guilt for the way things had been at home, but she pushed it away, wanting to enjoy herself. As the night progressed, Emma found herself drawn into conversations with various guests. One of them, a man she didn't recognize, but who seemed overly attentive, offered her a drink. His charm was disarming, and despite her initial reservations, Emma accepted the glass, hoping it was just a gesture of hospitality. "Thank you," she said, taking the sip. The drink was smooth, but there was a peculiar taste that she couldn't quite place. "No problem," he replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's a special blend we're serving tonight. I think you'll like it." Emma felt a sudden wave of dizziness and dismissed it as the effects of too much excitement and too little food. She tried to steady herself, but the room began to spin. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on a nearby table. "Are you okay?" Ova appeared beside her, concern etched on her face. I'm just feeling a little off," Emma mumbled, struggling to stay upright. Ava's eyes flickered with something Emma couldn't quite read. "Maybe you should sit down for a moment. I'll get you some water." Emma nodded, feeling a growing sense of unease. She sat down on a plush sofa, but the room continued to spin. Her vision blurred, and she felt increasingly disoriented. The last thing she remembered before everything went dark was the man from earlier approaching her, his expression no longer friendly but sinister. When Emma regained consciousness, she found herself in a dimly lit room she didn't recognize. Her clothes were disheveled, and a wave of panic surged through her. She tried to piece together what had happened, but her memories were fragmented and unclear. She tried to call out, but her voice came out as a weak whisper. The door creaked open, and the man from the party walked in, his demeanor cold and calculating. "You're finally awake." Emma's heart raced. What happened? Where am I? He ignored her questions, stepping closer. "You were out for a while. I thought it was time you woke up." Emma tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy and unresponsive. "Please, just let me go." I don't know what's going on. The man's smile was chilling. Oh, I think you do. It's just that you're not in any condition to do anything about it. Before she could react, the man's hand was on her arm, and she felt a wave of dread wash over her. The reality of her situation hit her with full force. She had been assaulted, and there was no one to help her. The darkness that had consumed her at the party had become a nightmare made real. Later, Emma would find herself alone in a corner of the ballroom, her disheveled appearance and the chaos around her a stark contrast to the elegance of the event. She had no memory of how she had ended up back at the party, but the overwhelming sense of violation was undeniable. Ava found her sitting quietly, her face pale and her eyes distant. "Emma, what happened to you?" Ava asked, her voice trembling. "I don't want to talk about it," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. The trauma she felt was too raw to articulate. Ava looked conflicted, but she nodded. "Let's get you home." As they left the party, Emma's mind was racing with fear and confusion. The world she had once known felt like it was crumbling around her. She knew that the assault would be the start of an even greater battle, one that would test her strength and resilience in ways she could never have imagined. The night had taken a dark turn for Emma, but Alexander was unaware of the full extent of the tragedy until he received a phone call that shattered any remaining semblance of normalcy in his life. Alexander was at home, pacing restlessly as he waited for Emma to return from the party. His irritation had been simmering all evening, fed by Eva's questionable influence and Emma's disregard for his ultimatum. He had tried to call Emma several times, but her phone went straight to voicemail. His anxiety was mounting when his cell rang, displaying Eva's name. "Ava." Alexander answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Where's Emma?" "Alexander, we need to talk." Ava's voice was strained, barely concealing her nervousness. "Something happened at the party." "What do you mean? What happened?" His voice tightened with worry. It's bad." Ava continued, her tone somber. "Emma's not herself. I think she's been drugged. I tried to help her, but..." "What do you mean she's been drugged?" "Ava, just tell me what happened." Alexander's frustration was evident. Ava hesitated, the weight of her words heavy. "She's been assaulted." "I'm so sorry, Alexander. I didn't know. I didn't realize until it was too late. She's in a bad state." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He felt his knees go weak, and he sank onto the couch, the phone still pressed to his ear. "What do you mean, assaulted? How could this happen?" "I don't know all the details." Ava's voice quivered. "But I'm with her now. We need to get her help, but I thought you should know first." Alexander's mind raced. He was overwhelmed with shock, anger, and an intense, searing pain. "I'm coming over," he said, his voice cold and resolute. "I need to see her." He ended the call and rushed to his car, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The drive to the party venue was a blur, filled with a mix of fear and rage. When he arrived, he found Emma sitting alone in a dimly lit room, her face pale and her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and confusion. Ava was beside her, trying to offer comfort. Alexander walked in, his face a mask of strained composure. "Emma," he said softly, his voice trembling despite his effort to stay calm. "Are you okay?" Emma looked up, her eyes meeting his with a blend of vulnerability and despair. "Alexander." He knelt beside her, his heart breaking at the sight of her distress. "What happened?" "Ava told me. I was drugged." Emma's voice cracked. "And I was assaulted." Alexander's face turned ashen, his entire world collapsing around him. How could this happen? He clenched his fists, trying to contain his rage. "Who did this?" Emma shook her head weakly. "I don't know. I don't remember much." The gravity of the situation was crushing. Alexander's initial impulse was to lash out, to find the person responsible and make them pay. But as he looked at Emma, the immediate concern shifted to her well-being. "I'm so sorry," Ava said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I should have been more careful." Alexander barely registered Ava's apology, his focus solely on Emma. "We need to get you to a hospital," he said, his voice firm. "You need to be examined, and we need to report this." Emma nodded, her strength waning. "I just want this to be over." As they made their way to the hospital, Alexander's mind was a chaotic storm of anger and helplessness. The image of Emma's pain haunted him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his world had been irreparably shattered. The sense of betrayal and frustration lingered, leaving him grappling with the gravity of the situation and the devastating impact it would have on their lives. At the hospital, Emma was taken in for examination, while Alexander sat in the waiting area, the weight of his decisions and emotions pressing heavily on him. He was faced with a stark reality. The life he had known was gone, and the path forward was uncertain and fraught with challenges. Alexander's drastic reaction was driven by a complex mixture of guilt, anger, and a desperate need to fix what had been irrevocably broken. The night's events marked a turning point, setting in motion a series of actions and decisions that would define the future of their fractured relationship. The months following that fateful night were a whirlwind for Emma. The immediate aftermath had been filled with hospital visits, counseling, and the long, painful process of coming to terms with what had happened. Despite her attempts to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, her life had been irrevocably changed. Emma had decided to pursue legal action against those responsible for her assault, and the process had been grueling. She worked closely with her attorney, Elizabeth Carter, who was known for her tenacity and compassion. Together, they built a case against Ava, the man Emma identified as her attacker, and others involved. One chilly morning, Emma sat across from Elizabeth in a small conference room, reviewing the final details before the trial. "Emma, you've been incredibly brave throughout this whole process," Elizabeth said, her voice firm yet gentle. "We've gathered a strong case, but I need to prepare you for what's coming. The defense will try to discredit you." Emma nodded, her resolve unwavering despite the anxiety that gnawed at her. "I'm ready. I just want justice." As the trial began, the courtroom was a stage for a painful confrontation. Ava took the stand first, her testimony a mix of evasiveness and reluctant acknowledgement of the night's events. Emma watched, her emotions a tumultuous blend of anger and sadness. The cross-examination was intense, with Elizabeth skillfully navigating through Ava's defenses. After several weeks of testimonies and evidence presentations, the verdict was finally delivered. Emma's heart raced as the judge read the decision. "We find the defendants liable for their actions and award damages to the plaintiff, Emma Turner," the judge declared. "This court recognizes the profound impact of the assault on Miss Turner's life." Tears of relief streamed down Emma's face. The legal victory was a significant step, but it didn't erase the trauma she'd endured. Elizabeth placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Emma. This is a victory for you and for others who have suffered in silence." Emma nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Elizabeth. I couldn't have done this without you." Despite the legal victory, Emma's quest for healing and closure was far from over. Her relationship with Alexander remained strained, and their separation had only widened the rift between them. Determined to make amends and explain her side of the story, Emma sought out Alexander, hoping to repair the damage and bring some understanding to their fractured relationship. One rainy afternoon, Emma stood on Alexander's doorstep, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and trepidation. When Alexander opened the door, his expression was a guarded mixture of surprise and wariness. "Emma," Alexander said, his voice guarded. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," Emma said, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I want to explain everything and apologize for how things turned out." Alexander sighed, stepping aside to let her in. "All right, let's talk." They settled in the living room, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Alexander's with a plea for understanding. Alexander, I know my actions at the party hurt you, and I deeply regret that. Emma began. But I need you to understand that I was drugged and assaulted. I didn't have control over what happened. Alexander's expression softened slightly, though the pain in his eyes remained. Emma, I've been struggling with everything. It's been hard to reconcile what happened with what I thought I knew. I know, Emma said, her voice trembling. I'm sorry for not being able to explain everything sooner. I've been trying to rebuild my life and make sense of it all. Alexander looked away, his emotions conflicted. I'm still struggling with the betrayal I felt. It's hard to move past that. Emma reached out, her hand hovering near his. I understand, but I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I've been through so much, and I just wanted to find some way to make things right. Alexander's gaze met hers, and for a moment, there was a glimmer of the connection they once shared. I don't know what the future holds for us, he said quietly, but I appreciate you coming here and explaining. As Emma left Alexander's home, she felt a mixture of sadness and hope. The conversation hadn't resolved everything, but it was a step toward healing. She knew that repairing their relationship would be a long and difficult journey, but the legal victory and her persistence in seeking understanding were crucial steps in reclaiming her life and finding closure. The future remained uncertain, but Emma was determined to face it with resilience and courage. The days following Emma's heartfelt visit were filled with a mix of introspection and indecision for Alexander. The emotional impact of their conversation lingered, casting a shadow over his daily life. Alexander found himself grappling with conflicting emotions, resentment, guilt, and a lingering sense of betrayal. He spent his evenings alone in his study, sorting through old letters, photos, and mementos of his life with Emma. Each item seemed to echo memories of better times, fueling his internal conflict. One evening, he was deep in thought when his friend and confidant, James, called. "Hey, Alexander, how are you holding up?" James asked, his tone both concerned and casual. Alexander sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I've been better, James. I had a visit from Emma. She came to explain her side of the story, and it's left me more conflicted than ever." James's voice was steady and reassuring. "Do you think you can forgive her, or is the hurt too deep?" Alexander hesitated. "It's not that simple. I understand now that she was drugged and didn't have control over what happened at the party, but the fact remains that she went to that party despite my warnings. The betrayal I felt, seeing her with someone else, still stings." James was thoughtful. "People make mistakes, Alexander. It sounds like she's been through a lot, and she's trying to make amends. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it might help you find some peace." Alexander rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of James's words. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive her, James. It's hard to reconcile the woman I loved with the situation that unfolded." Meanwhile, Emma continued to grapple with the consequences of her actions and the unresolved tension with Alexander. She sought solace in her close friends and therapists, trying to find a way forward despite the emotional scars. One afternoon, Emma met with her friend Rachel at a cafe, hoping to find some clarity. Rachel, ever supportive, listened intently as Emma poured out her frustrations. "I went to Alexander's again," Emma said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I thought maybe if I explained things clearly and apologize, we could find a way to move forward." Rachel nodded sympathetically. "And how did it go?" "He listened, but I could tell he's still struggling," Emma replied. "He said he appreciated my explanation, but he's not ready to forgive me. It feels like we're stuck in this limbo." Rachel reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on Emma's. "Sometimes people need more time to process things. You've done everything you can to make amends. Now it's up to him to decide if he can move past it." Emma sighed, looking out the window at the bustling street. "I just wish things could be different. I want closure, but it feels like we're both trapped in this unresolved conflict." Back at Alexander's home, he faced a pivotal decision. After reflecting deeply, He decided to reach out to Emma one final time. He wrote her a letter, carefully choosing his words to convey his feelings without adding to her pain. Dear Emma, I've taken some time to reflect on our recent conversation and the history we share. I understand that you've been through an incredibly difficult ordeal, and I want to acknowledge your bravery in facing it head-on. Our past holds both beautiful and painful memories, and while I appreciate your efforts to explain and apologize, I find myself unable to fully reconcile with the betrayal I felt. Forgiveness is a journey I'm still grappling with, and I can't promise that I'll ever reach the point of complete closure. I need to be honest with myself about my limitations in moving past the hurt. This doesn't diminish the respect I have for you or the hope that you find peace and healing in your life. I wish you all the best, Alexander. Emma received the letter on a quiet evening, her heart heavy as she read Alexander's words. The finality in his decision stung deeply, but she understood the need for him to find his own path to healing. She folded the letter, feeling the weight of their unresolved conflict and the finality of Alexander's decision. Emma reflected on her journey, recognizing that while she had taken significant steps toward healing, the wounds of the past were not easily healed. She was determined to focus on her own growth and the positive changes she could make in her life moving forward. As the story closed, the unresolved conflict between Emma and Alexander lingered, a testament to the complexities of human relationships and the challenges of reconciliation. Both characters were left to navigate their separate paths, with the hope that time and understanding might eventually bring some measure of peace and closure.